this session, so it's being recorded. So Mr. Breen, especially watch your P's and Q's. Welcome everybody. I'm Rob Felber. I'm president of Felber Public Relations and Marketing, and I am the chair of the Entrepreneurs Association here at John Carroll University. And I'd also like to welcome a couple other my patriots here in John Carroll. We have our vice chair, Mark Rashan, who's in a snowstorm with Tornado Technologies. Our second vice chair, Brendan Breen. Members of the executive committee, Bob Valenti. We have several members of the programming committee, which are directly responsible for making these programs work. So we have Andrew Connors, I have Greg Jens, and John Hassani is here as well. And John's actually responsible for our speaker today. I wanted to draw your attention to our website at jcuea.org. And we have several more presentations posted. We do have our next presenter on the 24th of February is Sanjay Singh from Mace. And on the 10th of March, we have Dustin Klein. And it's not posted yet, but in May, we will have Rebecca Morgan. So please go to, again, jcuea.org and take a look at those programs. And if you have any questions or ideas, please let me or Andrew know from a programming standpoint. So with that, I am going to turn the program in a moment over to John, but the timeline for today is going to be that our presenter, Anthony Foti, welcome, is going to present from about 4 to 4:45, give or take, and then we'll have some time for Q&A, and then we can do breakouts from 5 to 5:30, if you can stay for that, and we'll do a couple networking breakouts in smaller rooms. And with that, if there's no questions, I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan Hassani, who's going to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Rob. I've known Anthony Foti for quite a few years. It's my pleasure to introduce him. Anthony is a graduate of the Ohio State University with a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration. He got his Juris Doctor from the College of Law. Anthony worked as an attorney at the law firm of Rosenzweig, Schultz, and Gillimbardo, specializing in corporate law and commercial litigation. In 1982, when Hosemaster was founded, Anthony was in college and began working at Hosemaster during school breaks. His duties at Hosemaster during those times included machinist, machine operator, shipping clerk, and just about anything else that needed to be done. In 1992, Anthony joined Hosemaster full-time and has held a variety of administrative and sales positions over the years. Anthony is currently the Chief Administrative Officer responsible for finance, accounting, IT, and quality assurance. Please join me in welcoming Anthony as he tells us how a 39-year-old family business became the North American leader in manufacturing flexible metal hoses.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Rob. Thank you to the organization for inviting me to talk about my company here. Topic I'm very happy to talk about for many hours, but I'll keep it short. First, let me apologize to you. I am not a professional speaker at all, which will be very obvious as you watch the presentation. And given what I'm being paid for today, I can still honestly tell you I'm not a professional speaker. So with that, I'm also a year into it. I'm getting used to this Zoom thing. I still don't know if I'm particularly all that used to it yet, but we'll do the best that we can. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about, first of all, who are we and what we do, to give you an idea of what Hosemaster is. Then I'm going to go through the history of how we got started and our evolution over the past 39 years. Then maybe talk a little bit about, our strategy, how our strategy has worked. A little bit about the fact that we're a family business and maybe a couple of things associated with being a family business. And then where do we go from here? What do we see in our future? Not so much in metal hose, but as a family business, how we're going to progress and where we see ourselves going. So I guess the first question that anybody asks is, what on God's earth is metal hose? And why does anybody need one? So I have a little bit of some PowerPoint pictures to maybe kind of help. So let me show you there. Okay, hopefully you can all see this. Is just kind of a nice picture. You'll see a little bit, but we'll explain a little bit more. We're located in Euclid, Ohio. That is our headquarters. It's where we started. The picture says Cleveland because we deal nationally and do some international, and people don't understand Euclid, but they do understand Cleveland. So it kind of gives them a geographical reference, but we're located in Euclid. We also have fabricating facilities in Houston, Texas, Atlanta, Georgia, and Reno, Nevada. And I'll talk a little bit about them and how we came about them. But that's where we are. And that's honestly a picture on one of the sunny days in Cleveland. So an idea. Okay, so we make metal hose and metal expansion joints. And here are just kind of pictures of the three different families that we're talking about. On your left, or at least it's my left, there's a corrugated metal hose, which is, this is gas tight and can handle pressure. Depending on how we make it or what we do is how much pressure it can handle, but this is a gas tight hose. In the middle, we have what we call strip wound hose. This is not gas tight. This is going to be more for conveying dry bulk materials like corn or plastic pellets, or it's used to protect other things. Some of you may have a shower at home with a handle that you can move, and there's a rubber hose that holds the water, but there's usually something like a metal hose around it that protects it, so it can be used as a protector. And the last are expansion joints, and these are used in large piping systems, refineries, for an example. So they have miles of pipe in the refinery, and just the change in temperature, heat and cold, is going to make that piping system expand and contract. And you need at various points in there something to absorb that so the piping doesn't break. And that's where expansion joints comes in. So that's kind of a brief thing. Question is, well, why does somebody use it? If you can design around metal hose, you probably will. Metal hose is expensive. It's not as flexible as, say, rubber or PVC. But when you have temperature concerns or chemical issues, permeation, these are things that rubber or PVC cannot handle. And so the simple rule is you're going to use metal hose because you can't use anything else. And that's where we come in. So it's usually going to be in a lot of critical applications that you'll find metal products. Again, looking at another part of the different things that we offer. Some of the industries that you're going to find it in, some of the biggest ones are steel mills and chemical plants, bulk transfer, pulp and paper. Again, these are going to be either the environment is going to be too harsh for something else, like a steel mill. Metal hose in a steel mill is conveying water or oxygen. Really nothing all that critical, it's critical, but not all that difficult. But the steel mill has too much heat, and rubber hose is going to melt, PVC will melt. So you need metal to handle the heat in that case. Other than that, it's going to be, again, various chemicals and whatnot. But that's why people will use metal products, or kind of have to use metal products. But that kind of leads into another question. So that tells you why on God's earth somebody would want one. But I guess the next question is, why on God's earth would anybody get into that business? So for that, I'm going to introduce you to my father. This is Sam Foti, and our story begins with him. He is a tool and die maker by trade. So he was born here. He was brought up in Sicily during World War II, which is, for those of you who know your history, Sicily wasn't a very good place to be during World War II. But then when he was 16, he either had to forego his United States citizenship or come back here, and that's what he did. And when he came back, he was trained, after coming back from Korea, who was trained as a tool and die maker, and that is his background. But he also happens to be brilliant, and he has a knack, a capacity of designing equipment, machinery for all kinds of different applications. So what happened, he was working as a tool and die maker, and a gentleman had bought a metal hose company that made the strip wound product I showed you, bought it from Buffalo and brought it here to the Cleveland area. But he didn't know what to do with it. And he was talking with his friend, who happened to be the owner of the tool and die shop, and said, "You need to talk to Sam Foti." And they met and they talked, and he hired my father. And the first thing that my father did was scrap all of their equipment and redesigned the way that strip wound metal hose is made. Again, he's my father. I can brag about him. To this day, especially in Europe, the machinery to make this type of product is referred to as a Foti machine, because that's the technology he developed in making that. So he worked at that company for about 20 years. During that time, he developed a relationship, or that company developed a relationship with a company in Italy that dealt in metal hose, and that company is called Tubaflex. More on them a little later. But after about 20 years, he was not happy with some of the things that were going on with the company, and he decided to resign. He had offers from other metal hose companies, but that would have required us moving. So we were sitting around the kitchen table, which is where all decisions in an Italian family are made, and deciding where do we go from here. Well, my brother and I had all worked with him at this other company doing odd jobs when we were little, from cleaning windows to just, doing odd things. And we always kind of thought we would do something with him. My brother was studying to be an engineer at the time. He is an engineer, and he wanted to pursue kind of that aspect of it. I was studying accounting at the time, was going to go to law school, and thought that I could help on an administrative level. So my father says that father's pride kicked in and said, the only way we can do this is if we start our own company. Well, we're in our early 20s at the time and have no concept of risk. So sure, we'll just start our own company. That's an easy thing to do. And so it's kind of how the decision to start Hosemaster began. But that brings us up to the first obstacle that we faced. And kind of through this, I'm going to present some of the obstacles that we were faced, how we overcame them. The obstacles were, my father was 51 years old at the time, and which is not that old, but to start something new is kind of old. And as a family, we didn't have much money. So my father had contacted this Italian company that was very similar in the sense that they designed and built their own equipment, and they were very technical, and he trusted them. And he said, I'm thinking of going out on my own and starting a company. Are you interested? And immediately the response was, how much do you need and when do you want it? So we first kind of formed a partnership with them. We were providing all of the technical, all of the labor, all of that, and then they put in money, and that's kind of how we were able to get things started. We started by leasing an old foundry here in Euclid, just on Babbitt Road, 17,000 square feet, I believe, and we did all the renovations ourselves, all of the plumbing, the electrical, whatever it took. And the first thing we did was we bought tool room equipment. Again, my father's background is a tool and die maker, so first thing was buy tool room equipment, and we began building our own strip wound machine. We built that, and then we started producing that strip wound hose. Again, all of us were, especially my brother and I, were operating the tool room equipment to make a machine. We were operating the strip wound. Whatever needed to be done, we were doing. We were shipping, and any of you who have been part of a new business, you do everything. So we did that. And then once we started getting some business, we hired somebody to run that machine, and then began designing our next machine. And that's interestingly been our history, because we design and build all of our production equipment. So we were designing equipment, using it, building up demand, creating the next piece of equipment. And that's really been our history for 39 years. But we started in that strip wound hose. My mother and my sister worked as well. My mother is a bookkeeper, and my sister was doing inside sales and creating marketing pieces for us. Then as that started to grow, we were wondering where we would go next. Well, this Tubaflex that we have a relationship with, they had a technology for making the corrugated hose that you saw is a different way than anyone else was doing, certainly in the United States. There was a few companies in Europe. That hose, certainly in the United States, was made very cheaply. It was a very crude kind of mechanical method. It wasn't a great product, but it was inexpensive. They had a technology where they used water to form the hose. It's called hydroforming. And it was very intriguing, and nobody in the United States had it. So our next step was we were going to try to go there. And we'll go back to here for a bit. So what we had contacted them, they were interested in us bringing this here. So my brother went for, I believe, 1 or 2 months in Italy to work in their factory and learn how to use this equipment. We then bought 2 machines from them. It's the only time we bought equipment. And we started making this hydroformed hose here in the United States. The technology made the product much better. It was more flexible, it would last longer, but it was very new in the United States, and it was more expensive. So our next obstacle was, how are we going to introduce something foreign, literally and figuratively, into the United States market and try to convince people to pay more for it? And this was difficult because how this hose was sold in the United States is manufacturers would make the hose, just the hose part, and then they would sell it to distributors known as fabricating distributors who had the ability to then customize whatever the end user needed, cut it to length, weld whatever fittings they're on to make it usable. And that was the role of a distributor. And these were very large organizations. Well, as we approached them, they weren't really interested. It was, again, very new, very different for them, something they didn't know and were not all that keen in wanting to kind of pioneer here. They had a tried and true product, and it was more expensive. And metal hose was always thought of as a commodity. Well, from the beginning, I'll take a step back and explain a little bit of strategy. When we decided to get into metal hose in particular, there was a big overcapacity of manufacturing, almost 4 to 1. So the idea was, okay, what were we going to bring? Well, what my father believed was that there was all of these people fighting over dollars and fighting over this commodity item and who's going to beat whose price and everything like that. He thought that there was a market for quality and service, and that people would pay for it. So that's what we started on the strip wound, and this is what we wanted to offer on the corrugated. Again, it was becoming a very difficult sell because these large fabricating distributors didn't want to take the risk and bring it on. So what we did was we had decided that we were going to have our own ability to fabricate assemblies. And then we approached distributors that were not in metal hose and could not make the assembly. And we approached them and said, we'll make the assembly for you. If you want to get into metal hose, we'll make the assembly for you. Now, again, I'm going to share here, just so you kind of get the terms I'm talking about. If you look at this diagram, when I'm talking about I talk about hose and then I talk about assemblies. And we can look at this diagram, and I'll also use your standard garden hose as kind of an example. If you look at your garden hose, you you have, excuse me, you have the green part, which is the hose, the flexible piece. But in order for it to be useful, you have the fittings on the ends, and that's where you can put it into the valve or you can make an attachment to. So the assembly is the hose plus the fittings. All right. So in this diagram, what manufacturers were selling was the center portion, which was just the hose and the braid, but the fabricating distributor was welding the fittings on and doing it to order for the customer. So our way around this was we're getting into the fabricating business. And then we went to non-fabricating distributors and said, if you're interested in getting into metal hose, then we'll make it for you. And that's how we got in. And then as people started using the product, they were able to see the benefits. They were able to see that it was more flexible, it had longer life, and it was ultimately a better value. So they paid more for it, they got more, they got longer life, and it ended up being cheaper. Once that started coming, now the bigger fabricating distributors started coming back to us and said, let's revisit this topic. And so we sell bulk hose to distributors that have the capacity to fabricate. And then we also make assemblies. Making the assemblies has been very interesting because not only did it help us get into the market, but it actually makes more sense because a manufacturer, I can consolidate demand from a lot of different distributors, and then I can build up a very large fabricating facility where a normal distributor can't. They just don't have the volume to do that. And we could take advantage of the economies of scale. So now we have probably the largest fabricating ability of anyone in the country just because we had to get into it. But now we can make over 1,000 assemblies a day. And it's all essentially manual welding. But again, this was a very important step in our progress. So again, our strategy has always been we were going to focus on quality and service. So you've always heard the adage, when you start a business, there's quality, price, and service. Pick two, because you can only do two. Something has to suffer for the rest. And it's not that there's a wrong answer. You just have to pick your strategy and be consistent with it. And we had selected, we were going to go after quality and service. So again, this helped us to promote the quality, and because we had a very large fabricating center, we could provide excellent service. Now comes the next obstacle. I'm in Cleveland. Somebody in California needs a product right away. I can turn it around right away, but it's going to take 3 days to get to California. So part of my service model was being degraded just by geography. So that's where the concept of fabricating facilities came in. This was a huge decision because as entrepreneurs and people who started, the biggest problem we faced was, how do we have a facility someplace else where we're not there controlling it every day? And it's a mindset. And that was our biggest obstacle because we're so used to having our hands on everything that it was very foreign concept to be able to have a facility in another part of the country where we weren't there. But we knew we had to do it. And our first facility we were going to open was in Houston, Texas. We chose Houston because for what we do, for the metal hose market, Houston is the largest market in the world. All of the refineries and chemical and petroleum down there, they buy more metal hose in Houston than anywhere in the world. Coincidentally, we had an independent rep group based in Houston that had a big facility that had extra space. So we were able to lease some space from them, and they were also able to help us oversee it, and that kind of gave us a little more comfort, but we opened up our first facility in Houston. It was scary for some of our distributors because other manufacturers over time and I would argue because of the commoditization of the product, ultimately ended up walking away from distributors and going directly to end users. And distributors, our distributors, were very concerned that this was a step in that direction. So the next obstacle we faced was a perception. People, they kind of trusted us, but they were just afraid, especially in that market area. And so all we could do is go to them and, you know, we told them what our plan was. We told them that this would actually help them locally, that not only could we provide backup for them, but we would have all these resources down there. They got it, but they were still nervous. Ultimately, we made the promise to them that if they were unhappy, we would leave. And that was, we said, we believe in this model, we'll do this. If you're not happy with this decision, we'll leave the Houston area as a fabricator and go back to Cleveland. And I think that was ultimately the comfort. It wasn't long for them to realize that we were not out to take the business directly, and that having local fabrication was very good for them, that they could now make promises they couldn't have made before, that we were there to support their fabricating. They could fabricate smaller jobs, we'd take the bigger jobs, and then, you know, there was a lot of service. So that turned out to be very good and very helpful. After a few years, we decided to open another one in Atlanta because we saw a lot of heavy industry moving to the Southeast. There were a lot of steel mills, a lot of people who use our product were kind of gravitating towards the Southeast. And so we chose Houston because it was in that area. Plus, UPS one-day delivery radius out of there covered a pretty broad section all the way into Alabama and a lot of others. So that was how we got to Atlanta. Because we had already had Houston, we didn't have the same perception issues there because people had seen how we responded, and that had worked well. And a few years later, we still hadn't addressed the West Coast. So we were looking for where we were going to open up, and we decided on Reno. There's actually very little to no hose business in Reno, but what Reno is kind of West Coast on the cheap. There are a number of large organizations in Reno, Amazon, to name a few, that there are carriers that for one-day delivery can cover all the way from San Diego up into Oregon. So we just chose Reno because of the ability to touch so many places on the West Coast. Because other than that, we thought we would have to open up two places, one in Southern California and another one probably either in Oregon or Washington. And honestly, the thought of opening any business in California was frightening. Still kind of is. I think, you know, it's not a very business-friendly state. So Reno was selected because of our ability to service so many areas in the West Coast next day. And so that's was kind of our evolution there. Then we had to think about what other products could we offer. Again, our strength is in our technology. We're a very technical organization. We're always trying to teach. We're always trying to be the experts. And drawing on that, we decided to get into the expansion joint. That was kind of our next step. And it lends itself very well because that, although it looks like a kind of a simple product, it's actually very technical. And there's a lot of design work that has to go into it. I am going to share a kind of a fun picture for you, but this is an expansion joint. So this is an expansion joint for one of the steel mills. It's about 7 feet in diameter. But you can see all that's going into this in order to be able to, so not only is it absorbing motion, but all this hardware is designed to control the motion. So if it has to move, we're only going to allow it to move in certain directions. We're only going to allow it to move so much. Again, a lot of design involved with this. So this was kind of a natural extension for us and, what we did insofar as being technical experts. So we got into expansion joints, and we make these from, 3 inches in diameter to here 7 feet. It's kind of a large thing. And that's been the newest thing for us. Well, I say new, it's been maybe about 12 years since we got into it. But the market for this is much larger than the metal hose market. So we see this as a very kind of promising future. So that's kind of, who we are, what we do, what our history was. And again, we'll look at the strategy. Again, our strategy, our pick 2 was quality and service. But we also had to look at, and I'll give you kind of my own, what I've deemed my own cardinal rule of sales, is that unless you screw something up, so we'll take that off the table, but unless you screw something up, you're probably going to lose a customer the same way you took them. What does that mean? So when you deal with commodities, so if you go in and you tell somebody, hey, listen, I want your business because I can beat this person's price, that's probably how you're going to ultimately lose the business. So once you've taken it, somebody may come in behind you and say, oh, wait a minute, I can beat their price. And so it's kind of that. And so with that, our idea was, okay, how do we make it difficult for somebody to come after us? Again, like any business, we could be our own worst enemy. And if we make the mistake, then that itself can drive somebody to leave. But aside from that, how do we protect ourselves? And so again, we said, okay, we're going to focus on quality and service, and we're going to put a ton of money and a ton of engineering into this. And so we design and build our own equipment. We train. We have what we call Hose Master University, where we're training customers. Again, we have other facilities, regional facilities throughout the country. The idea being, if somebody wants to come after me, they're going to have to come after me with a whole lot of money and a whole lot of expertise. And that's easier for me to live with than just somebody coming after me with price. So again, we worked very hard to take people off the price and buy into a value concept. And that's the most important thing, was to get off that value concept and get it to something more controllable. And again, build these obstacles for other people, and those obstacles being money and tech and engineering. So that's kind of been a strategy, and that's how it's been working. And thank God it's been very successful. Right now, we're about 400 people and about 60 million in sales. But for this past year, it's been growing. So we're thankful for that. But we're still a family business. And there's some interesting aspects about being a family business. Now, although there are 2 generations of family here, my father and us. My father will be 90 years old. He still comes into work. He made a brilliant move a while back, but I'll get to that in just a moment. But although we have 2 generations here, we're still, I guess, from an evolution standpoint, first generation business, because we were all involved from the beginning. And what that means is that we really haven't faced a lot of the issues that drive family businesses out. Those usually start coming in at 2nd and 3rd generation, when you're starting to deal with a lot more family members and a lot more extended family members. And we just haven't been there yet. Excuse me. So from that evolution, I can't really speak to a lot of those problems, because thank God we haven't been there yet. But you still have the issues of, there are family members involved in the business and family members who are not. From the beginning, my father had made a rule that we were not to discuss business outside of Postmaster. And it was for a couple of reasons. One, for the family members who are not part of the business, it's just not fair to them, because they're not a part of the conversation. It's just, they feel left out. More importantly, though, is what he called the pillow talk. And what I mean by that is, so my brother and I, we work extremely closely together, and we, believe it or not, we agree with each other, I gotta say 95+% of the time. But when you're gonna talk with your spouse, you don't talk about the 95% of the time, you're gonna talk about the times you disagree. Because you came home, you're upset about something, you're upset about the disagreement. So what would happen is the only thing your spouse hears are the negative stories about your brother or your father or whoever it was. And now they're going to have the wrong impression. And because they want to be protective of you, the way they treat the other family members is now going to be affected. And that's just wrong. So he said from the beginning, you do not discuss business outside of the business because it ultimately can hurt the family. And that was extremely important. And I can tell you that it's something we have respected for now 39 years. My wife gets a little upset with me because I kind of take it to an extreme, and she likes gossip. So she's like, how come I have to hear about all the things going on with so-and-so over there from other people down Esther and not you? But no, it's been very good. Lastly, I'll talk a little bit about, where I see us going and everything else. I think it's probably most businesses, but certainly ours, the growth is not linear. It kind of grows and then you hit a plateau and then you have to kind of upset and make some real changes and then you go to the next plateau. And so it's kind of a series of going to different plateaus. The first plateau was the pure entrepreneurial with my father. And he was the perfect person to do that. He was, damn the torpedoes, you do whatever it takes, you get it done, clean up later, just go. And that's how we work. And we were, that way for probably, it may be a good 7 or so years. It was just go. Then we kind of hit a plateau, and my father also getting older, and he said, what I want to do is I want to do what I love doing, and that's research and development. And I don't really want to get all that involved with the other stuff, particularly the stuff that I have to deal with. Doesn't want to get involved with HR issues, doesn't want to get involved with all the others. He wants to do research and development. So that's when he kind of turned over the running of the company to now our generation. And so again, he's still involved, he still does his research and development, but then we took it and then we kind of started our own path. And it's been good, and we've added more organization and more procedure, but now we're at another plateau and we have to ask ourselves now, are we the ones capable of taking it to the next level? And what do we need to do? Because again, our strength, because it still was entrepreneurial and it was still, you don't need strategy. You just go as fast as you can and you clean it up later and, you just do the next right thing. What do I do? The next right thing, just keep going, next right thing. Now we're of a size where we need to implement more strategy, more budgeting, more, what are you going to do in the next 3-5 years? Make plans and work towards them. And so that's kind of been over the past year or so, what we're trying to focus on. And that's been a real training certainly for me and for, my generation, is just to learn how to now let go. We believe that we had to be the experts in everything. If you oversaw accounting, you had to be an expert in accounting. That was it. And then if you were going to take IT, you had to be the expert in IT and you had to be the expert. And we got to a size where that's just not possible anymore, certainly for all of us. And now we have to bring in people who can take on these things and who can guide us into creating strategies and budgets and holding people accountable to these things. And that's really where we are now. And that's kind of our focus for the next year or so, is to add this level of planning and strategy and holding people accountable. We have a president who's not a member of the family, and he had said, listen, I respect people's efforts, but we're not in the efforts business. We're in the results business. And that's what we're having to focus on now is let's get results and move on there. So our strategy or our thing going to the next plateau is to be able to implement now the ability to plan and strategize and hold people accountable for targets and moving them on. And it's a new thing for us. It's exciting for us, but the old dog, new trick kind of thing. That's where we are. So I see I've hit my 45 minutes.
Thank you.
Hope I've touched on the things you were looking for, but that's us.
That was a great story, Anthony, and we not only appreciate you sharing it with us, but sharing the personal struggles and such, and it's tough. And I liked your comment about decisions being made around the kitchen table. Some of the best decisions are there. As a firefighter, all the best and worst decisions are made at our kitchen table. We're going to now open up for questions, and I know there's several people that have put questions into the chat. If possible, I'm going to ask you to ask your question, but I know Raylan got ahead of everybody days ago, and I wanted to see, Raylan, if you wanted to come off mute and ask your question.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed all the information you shared. So clearly 2020 was a crazy year, and I was wondering, what was your greatest lesson learned?
Wow, that's actually a fantastic question. So I'll try to see if we're smart enough to have learned anything, but probably the first thing I learned was kind of an old phrase that I heard, which is, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. So that was kind of the first thing, is that, hey, no matter what you think you're going to do or want to do, life has a way of kind of changing that. And maybe the first thing was, you just have to be agile. You have to be flexible. You have to be willing to adapt to whatever's going on and not just be so head set in your ways. And that was kind of a big challenge, is to say, okay, what do we need to do now? How do we respond to this? Respond to, some of the markets either closing down or getting a lot smaller. What do we do? And it was that agility was probably the most important thing. But along with that, I would say, was the importance of communication. And it seems kind of obvious, but in some respects it's not. And I'm in communication on all phases, communications with employees. We're trying to run our business, trying to do this, and sometimes you don't think about, what are they going through? What are they going through personally? What are their fears? They don't know what I know about the business. They don't know what I know about what's going on in the world. And unless we tell them, they're going to live in fear. So we had to really up our communication game and start, holding more meetings with people, tell them what's going on, what our plans are, why we're doing certain things. Before all of the PPP and everything, we had to lay off a few people, but we needed to get everybody together, explain, why we chose, not on an individual basis, but why we chose the people that we chose. We just had to keep that communication open, and that was very important. And then it was our customers. What's going on? Where do we see the future? How they needed to know we were going to be there for them, and we had to, communicate. So those were probably, off the top of my head, the two biggest things over the past years that we learned.
Well, thank you very much for sharing. Those are wonderful. And another part of my question, you kind of touched on it, but what is your vision for 2021?
Hopefully everybody gets vaccinated and everything comes back. But again, from the personal business standpoint, for us, it's working towards that next plateau, which is, again, adding a level of structure and letting go of responsibilities that we always just clung to with iron fists as a family. And it's just something that needs to happen for us to get bigger. And that's probably our biggest lessons for 2021.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Raylan. And I'm going to let you guys come off mute. I know several questions have been put in the chat, but I think Mr. Valenti, Mr. Jens had some questions, Mr. Chalco. Who wants to ask their question?
Well, I can go.
Thanks, Bob.
Anthony, a very great presentation. Guess I really kind of pick back up on what you said. In the past few years, with the disruptive changes in the global economies and the use of artificial intelligence, how has that really impacted your business with regards to number of employees, use of artificial intelligence, and the onset of global competition?
So right now, or for what we do as manufacturing and fabricating, it's still very labor intensive. So insofar as that goes, it hasn't really changed much, but we are adopting some technologies that would not require human involvement. Where we see a lot of this actually changing is how people deal with us from a how do they place orders and how do we help them design products for their applications. That's where we see a big use for technology, and we have been doing a lot of programming to one that we've adopted internally to help them, but then what we can open up and offer customers so that they can start designing their own and being able to place orders, design a product and place the order directly without having to go through us. So from a technology and design standpoint, I think will probably be the biggest impact for us.
Matt, I would imagine also that you spent a lot of time in making sure that your research is patented so no one can steal, et cetera, your ideas that your father designed, et cetera. So how much time do you spend on protecting your trademarks and your patents, et cetera?
So we actually approach this a couple different ways. Patents are great, but you are disclosing your technology. And it doesn't require much for a clever engineer to start designing around it. So the kind of the line that we draw is if we've designed something that could be reverse engineered in the field, we're going to patent it. If we've come up with a process that we can keep here, we're not going to disclose it. And that's kind of been the line that we draw. So a number of the machines that we've designed and built here for production, we don't patent. But things that we've designed for special fittings and things like that, that'll be out in the field, we have.
Okay, who's next?
I'll jump in. So Anthony, it was a great presentation. Really enjoyed hearing about it. A couple of things floated through my mind. Do you, is most of your work domestic or do you ship around the world?
We do ship around the world, but most of what we do is still within the United States. And it's largely just because once you make the decision to go outside your borders, everything changes exponentially. So kind of what we get from foreign countries, we've almost stumbled on. We don't believe that we've penetrated enough the United States to start actively trying to pursue going beyond the border. So we do some stuff, some of it's by reputation or, contacts from others, but we've stayed focused mostly in the United States.
So the next question is a little more probably difficult to answer, but you mentioned that you have an outside president. What was the family dynamic? If you can share, how much of your C-suite is family? How much of it is non-family? And how did you go from being, what was the thing that kind of drove you and the decision that drove you to start to look outside? And then how did you find that person?
Okay, so I kind of wish I could tell you there was a lot of drama involved in this, but there really wasn't. We had this idea of us as a family talking to each other and saying, listen, do we have the skill sets? We had terrific skill sets to get to a certain level, but if we're being honest with ourselves, do we have the organizational skill sets of people who can do $70, $100 million companies? And we said, although we're bright people and we can learn, we need to bring some of this talent in. And so we said, we need to bring somebody in with a goal of having this person become president. So it was about 11 years ago, we went out on a search, and coincidentally, a friend of my brother's who has a company in a related industry said, oh, you have to meet this person. His name's Jeff. He's terrific. A lot of experience, worked with large companies, but still appreciates the entrepreneur spirit and everything. And we met with him and really enjoyed him. And we hired him, and his background is in sales and marketing, and that's where he started. And again, we still have this belief that you have to earn everything. So we started him there, and then he worked and he proved himself. And then, wow, I'm going to say about 3 years ago, but don't quote me on that, is when we said, okay, I think it's time. And we promoted him to president. And it's been very good, and it's been very helpful because, a lot of times you get your own echo chamber. You have your family, you have all this, and, families tend to think alike, not on everything, but for a number of things. And this is a different voice, and that's very helpful. So it all started when we had to face ourselves and say, how much of this do we think we can do ourselves and the way we've been doing it? Once we came to that realization, the idea of bringing somebody in as a president really was easy.
Thank you. We have about 5 minutes left of Q&A. Who else, I think?
Sure. Has anybody proposed a question that hasn't been answered? Because I do have a question that 3 of us here would love to hear about, I know for a fact. So Anthony, congratulations on your business and your growth. It's exciting. Myself, Spike McGee, and Rob Felber are all in the marketing world.
Okay.
So this question is, it's a comment and then a question. So you've done a phenomenal job on your website to educate your prospects. I mean, I don't know much about flexible hoses and expansion joints, but because of your website, I could educate myself and really know that you put yourself in a thought leader position by everything you're putting out there, your blogs, your resources, you name it. So the question is there any way that your company has been able to determine the benefit of your marketing efforts, your content marketing, creating these blog posts, having a resource guide, a very robust website? Have you seen or noticed, or have you gotten any business because of your marketing presence?
So in all honesty, I can't tell you that I can trace that we've gotten more business. A lot of this came from what I described as the mentality of do the next right thing. So when we said, okay, who are we and what do we need to do? Then it's always, what do we need to do to support this and move on? And that's kind of where a lot of the training came in. Now, what I can tell you is because of a lot of these efforts, we get a lot of involvement from our distributors, and we get invited to go into end users with them. So a lot of what our strategy has been is, I'll call it pull through, where we will, and they even trust us to go in directly. We're going to the user and we're educating them on why they want the quality. Then we pull that through distribution. So that's been kind of how that has funneled. And our education and all this has not only given us the credibility to do that, but strangely enough, it gives the distributor the comfort that we're not going around them, that we're sharing this information, that we're not doing a pitch that they couldn't do with training. And so they come here to get that training, and so that we're working together. So that we can trace, and that has had an impact.
Nice, thank you.
Great question, great answer. Who wants to be the famous last question?
I could jump in. So thanks, Brendan, for teeing that up. That was definitely top of mind. I can tell there's a lot of salesmanship in you, Anthony, as well. Curious as to the impact on your sales efforts last year, and any interesting things you did differently, sort of from a remote standpoint, leveraging different technologies, something that you were doing to sort of keep in front of your clients. I know everybody's trying to figure that out still. And I'd be curious to see if you had any silver bullets there.
I don't know about silver bullets, but it was very challenging, especially at the beginning. So we are very personal people. There's a lot of personal touch in what we do. And again, maybe it's a sign of age, but you show your face there. You're there, you're helping them, you're in the field with them and you're there and you're wearing a shirt and tie too, by the way. You know, that's just kind of been our thing, our shtick, if you will. So this disrupted that quite a bit. What happened was we started much more, again, these Zoom kind of things and a lot of direct calling, more so than we actually had before. What it also did was it forced our salespeople to plan better. So they were having to come up with all kinds of lists of who I need to talk to and at what frequency and what am I going to do, and start operating from lists and schedules and things, where a lot of times their schedules was determined a little bit more by, oh, this person just needed something, I can go visit them, or I'm going to be in this area, I'll go talk to this person. This put in a little more, forced them to be a little more organized, which I think is going to have some benefits in the future. But it was, all right, now we just need, we got to keep up that touch. So let's keep calling people because nobody was allowing you to come in. Nobody, so let's talk, let's Zoom, let's use the iPhone. So if somebody has an issue, let's do Skype. Show me your application on the phone. I'll talk you through it there. It was more of that, but yeah, it really was a challenge.
Well, thank you, Anthony. And on behalf of the executive committee and programming committees, we appreciate all the advice, and I echo everybody's sentiments. This was a very good presentation. For those that didn't realize, we are recording this. Anthony has a family first commitment, so we're gonna let him go, but we are gonna go to breakouts. With the breakouts, a couple reminders. First of all, JCUEA.org. Next two presentations are posted and more to come. So you can always go there. You can RSVP directly, put it right into your calendar along with the Zoom link. So again, thank you, Anthony, and again, thank you to the committee. So I am going to stop recording, and we're going to go into breakouts.